Welcome back to Questing Beast, I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at Nightmare over Ragged Hollow. This is an adventure module for characters of level 1 through 2, so it's a good starting level adventure. It's designed for old school essentials, but of course it's going to work just fine with any old school type rule system, like my Knave 2nd Edition rule system, for example. It was published by the Merry Mushmen and written by Joseph R. Lewis. Now, the Merry Mushmen have been famous for a while now in the old school D&D scene for creating Knock. And Knock is a series of 4 volumes so far that catalog a lot of the best writing on old school D&D and lots of great layout, lots of fantastic writing, just beautiful works of art, really. And now they've started creating their own adventure modules. This is just one of 3 that they have recently created. The other ones being the Horrendous Hounds of Hindenburg and Raiding the Obsidian Keep. And I'm excited to check these out at some point in the future because I was very impressed with what I saw in this one. I love me a starting adventure, but this is more than just a single adventure. It's really more like an adventure region. If we open up the book here, we see that the cover comes off. It's one of those kinds of books. And you can see that there is maps inside of a lot of the main locations, along with random encounter tables. And then we have a map of the town itself of Ragged Hollow. And on the back here, we can see the entire region. It's 3 hexes that you can slot into whatever hex crawl you happen to be running. Ragged Hollow, the town itself, is right here, but each of these red locations is another fully fleshed out place that you can go to and have interactions at. There is a main problem or situation happening in the town, but if players ignore that, there is plenty of other things to do. I think there's around 3 or so different dungeons that you can explore. There's lots of NPCs to interact with, lots of treasure to find in many different varied locations. I'm a little conflicted on the removable cover. In some ways it's nice because you can have this as a handout for yourself to help you run the game. But on the other hand, it makes it kind of annoying to handle because the book itself then just becomes this kind of stapled floppy paperback. And I'm not sure if I like the feel of that. It's, whatever. I've seen other books do it before. The other big example being Through Old Tan's Door, that series of zines. At first I thought it would be interesting to use this as a kind of game master screen for when you were running it, but then I realized that if you did that, unfortunately, the players would be able to see the back of it with a lot of information that they would use to kind of cheat and know too much about the adventure. So unfortunately, you can't use it that way. It'd be really cool if it was set up that way though, so that way you would have a game master screen and an adventure all in one package. Maybe something for the Merry Mushmen to think about in the future. Here's all the people who have worked on it. Joseph R. Lewis is the author of a bunch of Dungeon Age adventures, which I have seen on Bryce Lynch's 10-foot pole winning the best. So this guy does know how to write adventures, if that is any indication. The background here is that it was originally written for 5e D&D, and then the Merry Mushmen kind of helped him adapt it for old school systems. There's a little summary here of what the OSR is all about if you're unfamiliar with it, along with some advice to read the Principia Apocrypha, which I helped contribute to, and the Matt Finch's Primer, which I also recommend. The background information of the adventure itself is that a character from Ragged Hollow went off into the nearby mountains and got infected by this horrible mutating goo. He fled back to the town and tried to get cured by the priests, but things got out of hand. He started becoming more and more evil and more mutated, and the paladins there shut the situation down by imprisoning the temple inside this kind of golden sphere to protect it, to protect the town around the temple from getting infected. So at this point, the temple is now filled with around 36 different characters who are trapped in there with this evil. And the evil is creating these nightmarish illusions, which the characters are fighting over and over and over again in this kind of loop. Every night, the bell of the temple rings a number of times corresponding to the number of people still left alive inside. After a whole week of this, the nightmares inside become dangerous enough to actually start killing people, and a kind of timer or countdown begins as more and more people die. Once everyone in the temple is dead, including the paladin who created this shield around it, the shield will collapse and calamity will break out and sweep over the town. The obvious mission here is to find a way to get into the temple and shut this down and seal off the evil permanently and destroy it before it can wreak havoc everywhere. Originally, there's no way to get inside it because this shield is impenetrable, but the shield is slowly shrinking over time. So after a little bit of shrinking, the top of the bell tower becomes visible, and you can find a way to get up into there and then climb down into the rest of the temple. Here's a list of all the different villagers that are still trapped inside. You can roll randomly to see which ones die every night. And there's lots of checkboxes to help you keep track of all of that. I really like this system where there is a countdown, there is a timer that adds a lot of pressure to the players. They're not totally sure what's going to happen when things get to 0, but it's probably going to be bad. And so this creates a sense of urgency where they can wander around the vicinity and do other missions if they want, but this is something that's going to have to be dealt with if they don't want to deal with the very bad consequences. The initial hook for level 1 characters is that you are a bunch of young people who have gone off on their kind of coming of age adventure called the Halloo, and you're all returning back to the town having made friends with each other when you notice all of this happening. There's a number of rumors here which can give you plenty of starting information, and like I said, there's lots of different locations and NPCs throughout this whole region, and they're all very interconnected. So this gives you lots of good hooks to get you started on things that you can do. I love the art and design all throughout the book. It's all just done in black, white, and this kind of pale red color. And the illustrative style, I think, hits this mark just right for level 1 adventures. It's slightly cartoony, but it also takes the world very seriously. It has a little bit of a fairy tale feel that I am quite a fan of. Now, we're going to start getting into the actual content of the adventure itself, but first, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Huckleberry, a dark and weird RPG inspired by the mythology of the American Old West. Players are bounty hunters that track down monsters corrupted by supernatural radiation. Huckleberry is classless and trait-based, with highly flexible character creation and scenarios that start with folk horror investigations before culminating in pulpy action showdowns. Resolution is fast and cinematic, with a unique ace mechanic that allows players to make their own luck. Grab the early access PDF using the link below and get all of the updates for free as they are released. So first of all, we get a rundown of Ragged Hollow itself. There's the temple over here, and there's plenty of useful locations to visit. Now, the layout of this is really well done. It reminds me of some of the layout that's been done in things like Old School Essentials, but it has a little bit of a twist on it. So whenever there's a main location like the Rhyme River here, if you have a section in red, that is your read aloud text. And it's usually very short and it's to the point and describes just the important stuff that players would need to know right away. Anything that is underlined and bolded here, like river, boats, house, and island, are things that are going to get expanded down here. So if players hear about these boats you've just read about and they ask more about it, you go straight down to boats, and now you know what to tell them. In the past, I've often said that I'm not a huge fan of read aloud text, but this is a really good way to do it because it is so short and to the point and doesn't waste your time. It's never telling the players what they're thinking or what they're doing. It's just giving you the critical information that you need to know. Each of these places has lots of very concrete, very specific NPCs that feel like they would be easy to run, and it gives you the useful tools and things that you would find in these locations that are going to help you in different parts of the world as you go exploring. For example, the Dunmiff Paper Mill has the miller is Naomi, 60 years old, tall, silver pixie cut, cheerful, with a backache, right? Straight and to the point. That's easy to picture in your head. Or this one at the home of Tobias, that's the guy that got cursed at the beginning. Tobias's mother is 41 years old, long gray hair, long gray wool dress, overly polite, gently implies that everyone is a sinful heathen, endlessly proud of her son Tobias, widow of Jonah, the local drunk, raises rabbits for food and sale. Just reading that, you get a sense of not only who she is, but who Tobias is likely to be being raised by this person. I like how there are night events in Ragged Hollow because you can keep track of day and night phases, especially if you're doing, exploration phases and keeping track of watches, as a lot of games tend to do. You know that things are going to change whether you're outside and during the day or the night. Local rivals. These are rival adventuring parties, which are always really fun, especially in kind of an open world hex crawl situation, because other people are going to be going after the treasure in these adventure locations. Like the Ragdolls. These are 3 local youths in Ragged Hollow who call themselves the Ragdolls. They want respect and wealth, both of which are hard to find here. Bogdan's crew, a bandit leader from a faraway kingdom, accompanied by his Lieutenant Castor, a fighter, and Jethro, the wizard. The Windler House is a spooky location pretty close to the main town, so it's likely to be one of the first places that players want to explore, a little haunted house crawl, get a sense for the dungeon crawling rules, fight some rat goblins, get a little bit of treasure, decommission some of the traps, and so forth. I like how some of the traps are described in very physical terms, which is something I always like. We have the wired kitchen here, with hundreds of wires crisscross the room in a dense silver web, leading to heaps of shrimp forks that have been scattered across the counters and floor. So if you touch one of these strings, it snaps and the fork flies at you and does 1 damage. But it's so concrete and physical, you can see exactly how it works. So rather than just saying, I roll to disable traps, you think of an actual way to disable it. If you travel to the north of the town, you come to Gloam Wood. I like how you can see all of the paths leading to each of the locations, as well as the number of hours it takes to travel on each of those paths. So if you're keeping track of your strict time records, which of course you always should be, then you will know exactly how much time has passed, and that can factor into your risk and rewards that you are thinking about. Each of these hexes has its own random encounter table. I like how the monster stat blocks are always kept on the same page right where you need them so you can reference them really quickly. I also like how some of the encounters aren't necessarily monsters. Like this one is a tree freshly hacked apart in brutal strokes, crude anatomical designs carved into broken limbs, a spot riddled with arrow punctures, and one stuck arrow. The ragdolls, we read about them earlier, spent the day here practicing their violent skills. That keeps in the game master's mind, the ragdolls might be nearby. You can visit a cottage where there is a witch, but she is a nice witch unless you mess with her, because if you mess with her, you will get automatically cursed. There is a goblin market, a classic of fantasy folklore, where you can trade with the goblins and get all sorts of interesting magical artifacts. You can go to the Sunny Island, where there is Yamoja, the giant blackfish, or a dam where you can find Doya, the giant albino beaver. And these huge creatures are in conflict with each other because the fish keeps destroying the dam that the beaver is building, so you can decide which of these sides you want to favor. If you want to go into a nearby barrow, you can find an evil witch down there, a hag that's pretty nasty to deal with. But like in any old school adventure, there's lots of good treasure that goes along with it. For example, you get her scarf, it allows the wearer to imitate any voice they have heard before. Or you get this chain that's 60 feet long and can move, tie, and untie itself on command, right? These aren't magical items that are giving you pluses to your attack or your defense and things like that. They're giving you new tools that allow you to interact with the environment in new ways. You can also travel to the Bleak Mountains over to the west, where you can find Olias's hut, who is a crazy mountain man who has been kidnapping people and stuffing them. Will you find out his horrible secret before he stuffs you? You'll have to find out. The Perilous Path, Mount Morn itself, this is where that NPC at the beginning of the adventure got infected to start with. So if you're not careful, that could happen to you too. Here's another great item, Vein Seeker, which is a short sword owned by a dwarf that helps you detect metals underground, right? But it has a socket in it that's eye-sized. Jethra was one of the wizards from an Arrival adventuring party. If you have taken her glass eye and you stick it into this eye socket, then Vein Seeker becomes sentient. I love that there's that little detail there. It's something that most players or most parties aren't going to think of doing. They may not even have the opportunity to do, but if they do, it's going to feel so good. In the area where you find that evil goo that infected that guy in the first place, if you travel underground, you can come to a circular chamber and go on a little dungeon crawl through these caves over here. If you travel to the south of Ragged Hollow, you come to the Wailing Hills, where you find an ogre den, a ravine, a bandit tower, and a comb. Once again, great illustrations. I love how their simplicity allows you to fill in a lot of that information in your own head and just helps bring it to life. There's an ogre den, but he's not necessarily a bad ogre. He just wants to be left alone. Do you want to kill him anyway and get his treasure? Are you going to be able to live with yourself? Here's the whole bandit tower with plenty of bandits. If you want to raid their entire keep, take them all out and take all of their stuff. But things are not always as simple as they seem because there are plenty of women and children working with them as part of their encampment. Are you going to kill all of them too? The last half of the book is the large dungeon crawl. So this is what happens if you actually climb down the bell tower of the temple and start exploring it. It's basically a 50-room dungeon, and there's like 4 or 5 floors to go through here. There's plenty of random encounters for the temple, but most of them aren't actually things that attack you, and that's because plenty of the rooms already are keyed with monstrous encounters that are more or less stuck in their current location. Now, this evil goo that has taken over that NPC and has infected several other people as well can really only be damaged by acid. So there is a number of different ways to acquire acid all throughout this building. Although, of course, if you travel around the surrounding area, you might be able to figure out other things on your own. For example, the bell tower itself has these little snails, and if you harvest them, you could crush them and make snail acid out of them. The rooftop has a number of greenhouses and observatories and a workshop. The next floor down has dormitories full of lots of different rooms where the monks were staying, but each of them has something weird going on. For example, when you open a door, a wave of hot blood floods into the corridor. It's kind of Shining style, along with countless dead eels and crabs. I love how there's plenty of clues to find. For example, there's a cellar map that you can find in the chapel. An ancient scrap of vellum shows the cellars below the temple, revealing a broken wall near the door of the vault and a narrow passage beyond it. It's always great to give players more information so that now they have a mission, right? Now we can find that secret door because we have this clue. There's a classroom with a portal on the floor and the ceiling that are concealed. So if you accidentally fall into the portal on the bottom, you start falling out of the top again, endlessly up and down. In the classroom, there is a gigantic, partially dissected frog holding a giant bloody scalpel that's seeking subjects for experimentation. So the nightmares, essentially, of all of the different characters that are trapped in this temple are leaking out into the real world and have taken on a kind of physical form. On the main floor, you can encounter some stained glass angels that'll try and fight you. Lady Constance, the paladin, who is the one that casts the spell that is sealing off the temple, is also here. If she dies, the actual shield will collapse, so you probably want to keep her safe. And there's nice little tricks built in here as well. For example, there's an organ which plays sounds that are so loud it can shatter the glass angels, although it can damage you too if you don't plug your ears. The cellar is where some of the most dangerous characters in the adventure are, and there's some great little moments as well. For example, in this room in the vault, you can find a purple candle that burns on a golden stand in the center of the room. A humanoid shadow wavers on the far wall. The shadow is Samson Windler, inventor whose experiments into immortality accidentally turned him into a living shadow many years ago. Sister Ruth, who's another NPC that's in this adventure, has captured him with the candle and has frozen him in place against this wall. That's a very spooky and strange encounter to have. I really like that. Tobias himself is down here. If you pour enough acid on him or use some sort of acid-based attack, then you can take him out and take this crown that's on his head, which is kind of causing all of these nightmares, and end this whole problem. There's also an area called the Crypts, which is actually a whole secret area full of some really powerful magic items, which if you have found the clues to it, you can actually get in there and take some of these. Now, if the monks realize that you are taking these, they will not be happy about it, but if you sneak one or two out, then it can make a big difference in your further adventures. So ending the adventure, there's a number of different ways that this can shake out. Of course, the authors can't think of everything, but one of the main problems is if they decide to not engage and just go wandering around the hexes doing their own thing, which they certainly can, then evil will start overrunning this entire area. And this tells you what's going to happen 1 day, 15 days, 30 days in the future as things get worse. At the back, there's an appendix of new magic items. A lot of these are just really great, very evocative, and very useful. Things like rune bells. Chaotic creature must check morale or will flee from the wielder of the bell at a maximum speed for 6 rounds. Or maybe Swifty the broom. This magical servant can clean and do simple chores, including cooking, does not speak but knows common. Always has a peppy professional attitude. Hates dirt, fears fire. Wouldn't you want to just have an animated broom like from the Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia following you around? That would just be great. I love how there is a whole appendix here of just replacement characters. So this is for level 1 adventurers, so you could die pretty easily. Not a big deal. Grab one of these, slap them on a character sheet, and you're good to go. Speaking of which, at the back, there is a new character sheet, perfect for old school essentials. So that is Nightmare over Ragged Hollow. Like I said before, I was very impressed by this, and it's really great as a level 1 to 2 type starting adventure. It kind of has everything, right? It has overland travel, it has dungeon exploration, there's tons of NPCs to interact with, there's plenty of new magic items that give you new ways to interact with the world. It's great. It has a very classic feel where it feels like it would fit in very well with a lot of early D&D modules, but it's also very OSR in the sense that it's very easy to use. It has a lot of great illustrations. The layout makes it very easy to run. As usual, if you like what you see here, I will put links in the description below for where you can pick this up in PDF or in print form. And remember to subscribe if you like this video and to check out the Questing Beast newsletter if you want to keep up with all the cool stuff happening in the old school Renaissance movement. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.